Good morning. My name is Chris Rowena, Lead Communications Analyst at Health Workforce Development. We're excited that you've joined us today for the Family Nurse Practitioner and Physician Assistant, or FNP PA Midwifery, and the FNP PA Postgraduate Fellowship webinar. Before we begin, I would like to discuss a few housekeeping items. Number one, our webinar is hosted in Microsoft Teams. If you're not familiar with the platform, you can find the view controls and the chat feature in the menu bar at the top of the screen. Number two, the webinar will be recorded and posted on our website in approximately 7 to 10 business days. Number three, today the chat option will be open during the presentation and we will answer any questions that you have in our Q&A session, which is at the end of this webinar. And lastly, the slide deck will be posted on our website and a link can be found in the chat box as well as all the other links that are relevant to today's presentation. And with that, I am thrilled to introduce Danielle Hatcher, Program Officer for Song Brown.
Thanks, Chris. So again, thanks for joining us today for our webinar. We're going to be going over the application and any updates for this year's cycle. Again, my name is Danielle and I'm Program Officer for the FNP PA Midwifery and Postgraduate Fellowship programs. The slide deck we're going over today is the same document as our technical assistance guide, which is posted to the Song Brown webpage. And while you're working on your application, it would probably be helpful to have the technical assistance guide open while you advance from screen to screen. The link to the TA guide and other helpful documents will be shared in the chat if they haven't already been. So first, we're going to go over Song Brown. Song Brown provides funding to education programs, including FNP and PA training programs, postgraduate fellowship programs, which are new this year, registered nurse education programs, primary care residency programs, and midwifery training programs. Song Brown provides financial incentives to programs who meet 4 statutory criteria, including graduating individuals who practice in medically underserved areas, enrolling members of underrepresented groups in medicine to the program, locate the program's main training site in a medically underserved area, and operate a main training site at which the majority of the patients are Medi-Cal recipients. So those 4 criteria are listed in the grant guides, your respective grant guides, and we're going to go over them in a little bit because it's pertinent to the application. Okay, as you all know, the application opened September 28th. The deadline is November 9th. If you submit your application early, which would be prior to October 26th, you'll be eligible for an early review. And a program officer will review your application and provide feedback. Once the feedback is provided, you'll then have 5 days to correct any errors or updates on your application. And if you submit after October 26th, you're not eligible to a review. And once you submit past October 26th, that's your one and only submission. Changes for this cycle. One of the biggest changes this year is obviously the addition of the FNP PA Postgraduate Fellowship pathway, as well as expanding midwifery programs. Another change is that race, ethnicity, and gender data for students and graduates will now be collected in aggregate, and we'll discuss that a little bit more later. And then this slide also contains updated funding numbers for this year. It's important to keep these items in mind before you apply. If you need approval from a governing body to enter into a grant agreement, it's important that you share our grant guide with your contracts office. Again, all of the respective grant guides for the different pathways have sample grant agreements at the end as attachments. So it's real important to get approval on that language, because we can't make any changes to our grant agreement templates. So by submitting an application, you're in essence saying that you already agree to those terms and conditions in those grant agreement templates. For information to gather while you apply, it's really important to have the correct grant agreement and payee data record signatories, as well as the names and full addresses of the training sites that you've used in the last academic year. We don't want you to include any specialty or elective rotation sites, as well as out-of-state training sites and training sites where primary care is not provided. You'll also need to know the facility type for each training site and the combined total number of hours that all trainees spent at each training site in the previous academic year. You'll also need race, ethnicity, and gender data for all current students and graduates, current practice site information for all graduates, as well as their national provider identification number. And that last bullet point is a duplicate. And then for information to gather, the third slide for this just includes any applicable attachments. So at the end of the application is where you'll attach your approval letters from your governing bodies, your accreditation sites, and then you'll also need to include any expansion letter. If you're an expanding midwifery program, you'll need to include your approval letter indicating the number of approved expansion slots. And then if you're a postgraduate fellowship program, just any correspondence related to accreditation if you have it. Again, there's a lot of helpful resources on our website, and I believe they've been linked in the chat as well. So at this point, the next few slides cover how to create an account or a profile in our online application system, the e-app. Most people already have a profile, so we're going to skip over these, but it's helpful to know that this information is here in case you haven't created a profile yet, or in the event that you have a coworker that needs to create a profile, or if you need to be updated to program director. There's helpful information on these next few slides. But right now we're going to skip to slide 19, or 20 rather, that talks about starting the application. So first you're going to click on, after you log in, of course, to the e-app, you're going to click on apply here, which is on the top left of that blue ribbon. A pop-up window with information about the program will appear, and at the bottom of the pop-up, you'll click the apply button. Only those with program director access will see the apply button. Helpful tips. When you're navigating the application, you'll see two buttons at the bottom of each screen, the previous button and the save and next button. If you don't see the save and next button, it's probably because there's missing data or all the information needed has not been entered, in which case you'll probably see an error message at the top of the screen as well, letting you know what's missing. It's important to point out that you do not need to finish your application in one sitting. Once you do have to complete the very first screen, which we're going to go over in just a second. So you do have to hit that save and next button at least one time to be able to log back in the future and finish filling it out. So it's advisable if you have grant preparers that are going to help you, the program director can initiate the application, fill out that first screen, hit save and next, and then you can log out. And then any other grant preparers that you have tied to your program will then be able to see the previously started application and continue from that point. Accessing your saved application. This is a small little screenshot, but it's the third tab over now. It says Song Brown applications in progress or submitted. It used to be in the past the second button. All previously started grant applications were on the second button, but they've now divided the button into two. So you have to click on that third button that signifies Song Brown application specifically in order to access your application. Asterisks, red asterisks indicate a required response before you can proceed to the next page. And then tooltips you'll see throughout the application It's a little blue circle with a question mark. If you click on that, you'll see more information about the field, or it's helpful just to make sure you're entering the right information in that box. Okay, so when you start the application, you'll want to select the program type that you wish to apply for. The options again are FNP, PA, FNP Postgraduate Fellowship, PA Postgraduate Fellowship, and Midwifery. A little bit farther down, you will then select your training program. You'll use that magnifying glass on the right to locate your training program name. If your training program is not found, you'll click on the box at the very bottom that says training program not listed. However, if you're a returning applicant and you're with the same training program, most likely you're in our system, you may not be able to find your training program. So if you know you've applied in the past and whether you were awarded or not, your training program should be in our system. Sometimes it's hidden from our website. So if that's the case and you use the magnifying glass to search for your training program and it's not populating, rather than creating a new training program, if you could just shoot us an email, our email will be at the end of this presentation. Just shoot us an email and say, we've applied in the past. I'm pretty sure my training program is in there, but I can't find it. That will help us avoid duplicates in the system, and it will create a much smoother process for you if you want to import data or anything like that. But if your training program is new and you do select training program not listed, you'll then be prompted to enter your training program name and address. Your training program name and address may be the same as your organization address if you are actually holding your program at that facility. If the program will be held in another location, obviously you'll want to input the actual address where the training program is taking place. If for some reason Google cannot validate your address, please reach out to us. And then if you enter a training program, it will need to be approved in the system, but you can continue your application during the approval process. So I just want to point out also that for any combined FNP, PA, postgraduate fellowship programs, you will need to create 2 training programs, one for your FNP postgraduate fellowship program and one for your PA postgraduate fellowship program. And we're going to go into how to fill out your application a little bit later for combined programs. But because we're talking about training programs here, I thought it would be helpful to point that out. So you'll want to, again, create 2 training programs, essentially one for FNP postgraduate fellowship and one for PA postgraduate fellowship. Okay, so now we're going to briefly go over the FNP, PA, and midwifery applications. A lot of this is the same this year as last year, so I'm really going to just try to highlight the changes or the important, frequently missed items, which includes contract administration. So there's 2 very important notes on this page. One is that your contract organization name must match what is reported to the IRS. And your 204 address is your remit to address. So if you're uncertain about what address your payment should be sent to, please consult with your contracting authority at your organization. This screen is really important because if you're awarded, having incorrect information on this page will most likely delay your grant agreement. So it's worth pointing out here, even though this is the same as last year, but it's a frequently missed thing. On this page, you'll also see an option to enter a PO box if applicable. Okay, the program description section consists of 1 required question. This is where we get into those 4 statutory criteria that I talked about earlier. This page of the application does refer you to the grant guide. So on page 3 of all of our grant guides, it lists the statutory criteria. But we want to hear how your program will be meeting those Song-Brown program statutory priorities. I think I missed a note down there. Oh yeah, the grant guide referenced on this page will vary depending on which pathway you choose. So if you're in the FNP PA pathway, it'll reference that grant guide. And if you're in the midwifery pathway, it'll reference that, the midwifery grant guide. For program data, you're going to select the appropriate response. Please select student data only if you have no academic year 21-22 and 2020-2021 graduates. So if you don't have any graduates for those 2 years, then you can select student data only. If you have any 21-22 or 2021 graduates, you'll want to select graduate and student data. And then if you're a new program, obviously you'll want to select new program, and you won't be required to enter in any student or graduate data on the later screens. If you select to import data, it will transfer to that red section kind of in the middle of the screenshot. This is the errors list. So you're going to be required to check each record, each training site. You're going to need to click into it and verify it to move it down to the non-errors list. When you review each imported training site, you will see a new required question that's new this year that you'll need to answer. And you'll want to provide the requested information and then click the button Training Site Reviewed for accuracy to move it down to that green section below. So that was for imported training sites. And then to add a new training site, you'll click the blue button at the top. And a pop-up box will appear to enter the information for that training site. You'll want to select the facility type that best applies to that training site. It's important to note that training site information does include various scored criteria. So this is a scored field for each training site. And for more scoring information, you'll want to refer to your respective grant guide. It's attachment A on all of your grant guides for more scoring information. For program funding and expenditures, the number of slots that you request for funding cannot exceed the total number of filled first-year slots in your program. And your annual expenses that you enter in the bottom can be higher than what you're requesting, but they can't be lower. So this is one of those instances where an error may appear. If your funding and expenditures for last academic year is lower than the amount that you're requesting, it will you won't be able to advance. So just make sure you're not requesting more than what you need. I'm sure that's not a problem. Okay, then we're moving on to student data. So similar to training site, what is the new question for sites? I believe it is the number of hours that all trainees combined spent at this site in the previous academic year. So there's a little tiny screenshot under this note here that has a screenshot of that question. It says, please provide the total number of hours that all trainees combined spent at this site in the previous academic year. Hope that helps. Okay, so now we're at student data. So again, if you import student data, you'll want to review it. All of the imported data, again, will get imported into the errors list, which is in red at the top. You want to click into each record and review it for accuracy, and then it will move down to the non-errors list. And then when you have new students to add, you'll add them similarly to the way that you did training sites. A new window will open, you'll input their information and click submit. Then you'll want to review all imported and new students. Please make sure that only valid student information is listed and that any data issues are resolved. Student data aggregate. This screen is new this year, so nobody will have any information imported to this page. So you're going to want to select Add Data to provide the race, ethnicity, and gender of students enrolled in each academic year. Each cohort should be entered in aggregate. for one entry or line item. So if you have 2 cohorts enrolled, you will have 2 line items of data. And if you have 3 cohorts enrolled, you'll have 3 academic years worth of data. And it's important to note that this student data aggregate is also a scored criteria. So you'll want to refer again to the grant guide, attachment A, for more scoring information. Then we've got graduate data. Same thing, if you've imported graduates, it will appear on the red errors list at the top. You'll want to review each one and move them down to the non-errors list at the bottom. And you can also add new graduates here by clicking that blue button, add a graduate. After reviewing all imported and new graduates, you'll then click Save and Next. For graduate data, when you're reviewing their information, you must add practice site information unless they're working outside of California. So if you know their practice site location, you'll want to import that here. This is also a scored criteria, so it's important for you to have accurate practice site information for your graduates. If the graduate is working outside of California, you can select no, and then there's a drop-down menu there where you can select practicing outside of California. And then similar to student data aggregate, this screen is new this year. This is graduate data aggregate. Again, there will be no imported data on this screen because it's new. So you'll want to select Add Data to provide the race, ethnicity, and gender of graduates from each academic year. Again, each cohort will be its own line item. So you'll enter your graduates in aggregate for each line. And this is also similar to student data aggregate. Graduate data aggregate is also a scored criteria. Okay, and then this is the last screen where you're going to attach your documents that we talked about earlier, your accreditation letters, expansion letters, and anything else, any other correspondence that's applicable to your training program would be submitted here. If the button is red, you can see the top screenshot shows the approval letter is red. That means it's a required item, so you'll want to upload it, and then once you've uploaded it, it will change to green, meaning you're good to continue. After that, we have the assurances page. You'll need to check the box here, certifying that everything that you've submitted is accurate. And then you would hit the submit button. So it's important to note that only program directors will see the submit button. Grant preparers can fill out everything in the middle. So program directors need to initiate the application and then they need to submit it at the end. Grant preparers can do everything in between. So if you're a grant preparer at this point, you won't see the submit button. At that point, you'll need to shoot an email to your program director and let them know it's ready for them to submit. And then your submission is complete. You can view and print your application back on your home page and the e-app. There will be a drop-down menu next to applications, and you can print your application. So now we're going to go over the postgraduate fellowship applications. For the most part, these screens are the same as FNP, PA, and Midwifery, with a few exceptions. So I'll make sure to point those out. Also recognizing the fact that this is everybody's first time applying for postgraduate fellowship applications. So I might take a little bit more time. Even on the screens that are the same, I might take a little bit more time. So similar to FNP, PA, and Midwifery, this contract administration page is really important because incorrect information here will probably delay your grant agreement if you're awarded. So just make sure that your contract organization name matches what's reported to the IRS and that your 204 address is your remit to address. And if you're uncertain with any of those, consult with your contracting authority at your organization. And then again, if you have a PO box, there's an option here to enter a PO box, which is fairly new. We didn't used to have that. On the program description page, again, we want to hear about how your program is meeting the Song-Brown program statutory priorities. And if you are a combined postgraduate fellowship program, again, if you're an FNP PA postgraduate fellowship program, we are asking again that you create 2 training programs. You're going to do an application for each training program, each pathway, one for your FNP postgraduate fellowship program and one for your PA postgraduate fellowship program. So in this program description page, we'd like you to indicate that you're a combined program, but then try to speak to each pathway separately if possible in this field. For program data, again, this screen asks if you'd like to import data, but because this is the first year for this postgraduate fellowship application, you're going to want to keep it marked as no. There will be no data to import. So just don't mark yes on this screen. For training sites, everything will be new. So you're going to want to enter a new training site. You won't have any imported training sites to review. A new window will open and you'll want to enter all of the required information. Select the facility type that best applies to each training site. If your training site doesn't fall under any of the facility type options, then you're going to want to mark not applicable. And training site information includes scored criteria. So again, you'll want to refer to the Postgraduate Fellowship Grant Guide, Attachment A, for more scoring information. Unique to the Postgraduate Fellowship application is this payer mix question when you're entering your training sites. So payer mix will be requested for all of your training sites. It does not have to total 100%, but you'll just want to enter the percentages requested in the appropriate fields. And payer mix is also a scored criteria. So just keep that in mind. For program funding and expenditures, again, the number of slots requested for funding cannot exceed your total number of filled first-year slots. And your annual expenses that you enter down at the bottom need to be equal to or greater than the amount that you're requesting at the top. For combined postgraduate fellowship programs, if you are a combined postgraduate fellowship program, as much as we'd like you to keep them separate, the FNP and the PA postgraduate fellowship separate, we do understand that for funding and expenditures, you're not going to have 2 different budgets. So it's fine if you put your combined funding and expenditure information, and in which case it would be the same on both of your applications. Okay, moving forward for this section of the TA guide, on the application, it might say student data, but because we're talking about fellows, you can just, in your head, this is where we're asking about fellows. Anytime you see add a student, it's add a fellow. But so this is our fellow data screen. You're going to add all of your fellows here. A window will pop up where you can complete all the required information. Again, combined programs, if you're in your FNP application, please only enter your FNP fellows. And if you're in your PA application, please only enter your PA fellows. Try to keep that separate as much as possible. Then you'll want to review all of the new fellows that you submitted, and then you can click Save and Next. We are also asking for fellow aggregate information, similar to the student aggregate information for the other pathways. So you'll want to provide the race, ethnicity, and gender of fellows enrolled in each academic year. Each cohort will be entered in aggregate as one line item. So again, if you have 2 cohorts enrolled, you'll have 2 line items on this screen. If you have 3 cohorts enrolled, you'll have 3 line items of academic years entered. And this aggregate information is a scored criteria. So that's worth pointing out. Okay, then you'll want to add graduates on the next screen. You'll click Add a Graduate, and a window will pop up where you can complete all required fields. Similar to entering your fellows, please only enter your FNP postgraduate graduates on this screen if you're in your FNP application, and vice versa for PA postgraduate fellowships. Try to keep your fellow and graduates separate between the 2 applications if you're a combined program. Then you're going to review all your graduates and click Save and Next. For graduates, again, it will ask for practice site information. So you must add practice site information unless you know that the graduate is working outside of California, right? In which case you would select that you do not know their practice site information, and then in the drop down below that, you'll select that they're practicing outside of California. And this information, again, is a scored criteria. Oh, this is repetitive. So if the graduate is working outside of California, I skipped ahead in my own mind. Then we have graduate data aggregate, similar to the fellow data aggregate. You'll enter the race, ethnicity, and gender of graduates from each academic year onto one line item. This is a scored criteria. The next screen is required documents. For the postgraduate fellowship applications, I actually don't believe there are any required attachments. We would love for you to attach anything speaking to your accreditation. So anything that's related to your accreditation as a postgraduate fellowship program is optional. You can upload it under the yellow button that says correspondence, please. As this is our first year collecting this information, we'd just like to know what sort of documents, accreditation documents there are, please, but it's not required. And then the next screen is assurances. Again, you're going to read the statement and click that you certify everything is accurate. Then you'll click the submit button, which again is only visible for program directors. And then your submission will be complete at that point, and you can navigate to the home screen to view and print your application, same way as the other pathways. Some common application errors. I tried to touch on this as I went through each screen, but again, having the incorrect signatory for either your grant agreement or your payee data record, which is the 204, having incorrect names for those signatories will definitely affect the turnaround time for getting your grant agreement signed if you're awarded. Having incorrect or missing required documents, listing the wrong facility type, having an outdated remit to address, having the wrong training program name, missing data, inconsistent data, those sorts of things. And that's about it. So if anybody has any questions, you can drop them in the chat. I've seen a couple come through. We also have our email. I'm going to leave this screen up while we do the question and answers.
All right, thank you so much, Danielle. As you can see, our team has put a lot of work into this program, and we're really excited that you've joined us today to learn more. We are going to transition to our question and answer session. The chat option has been open, and you guys have already been dropping them in there. We're going to answer our questions in the order that they're received, and we will do our best to answer all the questions that you have. I'm also going to go through and make sure that any questions that were put in the chat are answered in the video as well for anybody watching this later. And so to begin with, we had to verify there's only one essay this year. And the answer back was, if you're asking about the narrative portion of the application, that is correct. The narrative or essay portion is the executive summary.
Mhm.
And then the next question was, what is the new question for sites? And the answer on that was the number of total hours that all trainees combined spent at the site in the previous academic year.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. The next question we had, FQHC is applying for the FNP PA Postgraduate Fellowship. Do we need to submit a training course curriculum accreditation? And the answer given in the chat on that is your FQHC is applying for fellowships. If so, we're only asking that you provide any program accreditation information that you have. We are not asking for course curriculum accreditation. Next question in the chat was for the nurse practitioner, physician assistant, is training site insurance information needed this year? And the answer on that one was no, that is not needed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, let's see. Scrolling down, I think now we're into questions that have not been answered, Danielle. So for the postgraduate fellowship program, could you speak to what the funds may be used for and what happens with auditing?
Sure. So funding is to be used for the training and education of your fellows. So we want to see, materials, faculty, those sorts of things. It's for, again, just to repeat, training and education of the fellows in your program. So once they're in your program and they're going through that course of study, we want to see you using Song Brown funds for that, the training and education of your students or fellows. And the audit is at the end. Grant agreements currently are 1 year in length. And after that 1 year, so that's your, I believe it's called the funding term. This is outlined in the grant agreement templates, which can be found as attachments on all the grant guides, by the way. But your funding term is 1 year long. That's the 1 year that you have to spend the funds. After that year is up, then you get 60 days to submit a final report outlining how you spent the funds. And so your final report is tied to your final payment. So your final payment is not released until your final report has been reviewed by somebody on the Song Brown team and approved that the funds went to appropriate places. So hopefully that answers that question.
All right, thank you, Danielle.
Mm-hmm.
Next question, is there a new program preference? If so, where can we learn more about this?
No, there's not. If you're a new program applying for the first year, it's the same process, same scoring, same everything. And you'll need to meet the same criteria or threshold points, however you want to describe it, to receive an award when we review applications as everyone else.
Can I respond to that? I think
Yes.
I did respond in the chat. So Danielle's correct. Currently, we have no funding for new programs, whether it's an FNP or a PA program,
Mm-hmm.
a midwifery program, or
Mm-hmm.
a postgraduate fellowship program. We don't have any new programs funding, and that would require the creation of a totally different type of application. I think that we are looking towards that for future years, but right now we do not have any funding for brand new starting up programs.
Right. Thank you, Melissa. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that. I saw your answer in the chat as I scrolled down. And,
Yeah.
appreciate you chiming in on that. All right, the next question, for questions relating to facility type, who can we check in with? Sometimes I have been unable to confirm the facility type.
I directed them to our email.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, I got it. We've got questions and answers are getting a little separated in the chat, so I'll have to scroll a little bit further.
I know. I'm sorry. I can stop responding that way. You can just respond.
It's all good.
You can respond. Go ahead.
All right. Am I correct that the entities that are eligible to apply for the postgraduate MP fellowship are clinical entities and not educational institutions? It looks like, is this yeah, I see the answer here. The training for the fellows has to take place in a primary care ambulatory health center. The focus would seem to be clinical entities. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Entering the graduate names and other demographics happens during the application phase or report if funded.
I responded to that as well. I stopped after this. So I said that the graduate names and demographics happens during application.
Yeah.
Right. They have to provide that as they're moving through the application.
Correct.
All right. And then we got a question from Pam Dow. I am applying under midwifery. Do we list our midwifery sites' primary specialty areas as primary care or OBGYN? Is the first question. And then let's answer that first, and then we'll get the second question.
Primary specialty area is primary
care. If it's primary care, you would put primary care. If it's OB, you would put OB. Just either of those apply as primary care. Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
But yeah, so just put whatever the closest specialty is. Yeah.
All right. And the second part of the question, much of midwifery clinical training takes place in the hospital as well as clinic. Is it acceptable to include hospital-based clinic sites in our reported training sites?
I don't believe so. It needs to be ambulatory primary care. Again, Melissa, will you correct me if I'm wrong on that?
So
hospitals.
She's talking about midwifery.
Oh.
So the training sites collected for midwifery, do we say that they have to be we say for your training sites, right? You said that we're looking for, we don't want any out of state, we don't want any specialty rotations. We want primary care focused training sites, correct? So if they have hospital-based clinical sites that are providing where primary care is being provided, that would seem to be acceptable, right? It may not necessarily, like the facility type, when they're choosing the facility type, if it's a general acute hospital, right, and doesn't count as an FQHC or something like that, they're going to say not applicable, I think, right? And so that may not, when it comes to getting points for being located in a primary care area, it may not count. But yes, if it is a hospital-based clinic that is providing primary care, you should include it.
All right, thank you for that answer. And a further clarification, so supportive birth and labor considered primary care?
I would say yes.
All right, thank you. Any more questions out there? Let's we've still got time in our webinar to answer more questions. So if you have them, please get them into the chat now. As an additional reminder, while we're giving you a chance to get those questions, if you do need further clarification, please email us at songbrown@hpi.ca.gov. And again, we will be posting a recording of this webinar in about 7 to 10 business days. The slide deck is already posted on our website, and you can find links to that pinned in the chat. If you look at the top of the chat, there's a little pin icon. Click on that, and you can see all of our resources there. And additionally, if you have colleagues that you feel should get this information, we do have one more webinar scheduled today. And you can send them the link to that. That webinar is scheduled for 2 p.m. today. And so if you have other people that you think could use this information, please forward that on to them. We would love to include them in this as well. All right, well, if no more questions are out there today, I want to thank you for your participation in the question and answer session. As always, you have great questions, and we appreciate being able to answer them. Again, please email the team at songbrown.hki.ca.gov if you have additional questions or your question wasn't answered as clearly as you needed. As a reminder, we will be posting the recording and everything else on our website in approximately 7 to 10 business days. We really do appreciate everybody joining us today to learn more about the Song Brown FNP, PA training, midwifery, and the postgraduate fellowship programs. We're excited to be able to offer them as a part of our health workforce development efforts at HCI, and are very grateful for your participation with us today. We always encourage you to go to our website to discover all of the great resources that HCI offers. As a final reminder, early submission reviews are due October 26th, and the application cycle closes November 9th. Thank you so much for attending today. And with that, we conclude today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.